Featuring the it girl of World War II pinups, Betty Grable, this film noir is considered one of 3 contenders for the first film noir. Many aficionados of film noir believe that The Maltese Falcon 1941 is the first true film noir. Another large group of fans believe The Maltese Falcon 1941 is one of 3 movies in contention for being the first film noir. The other 2 films are Stranger on the Third Floor 1940, starring the incredible Peter Lorre, and today's film, I Wake Up Screaming 1941. I personally take a more anthropological view and believe that film noir, as a collection of elements, extended from the early 1920s all the way up into now, and I'm working on a video that illustrates this view. However, today we will focus on one of 3 major contenders in the first of a series on understanding this film's place in film noir. I Wake Up Screaming 1941 has the look and feel of what is considered a classic film noir. TCM's Eddie Muller says this film doesn't have the recognition that the others do because the director, Bruce Humberstone, never made a movie that looked like this before or after. The leading man, Victor Mature's acting, was never considered at the level of Humphrey Bogart, and glamour girl Betty Grable wasn't known for serious roles. However, I must say that Victor Mature and Betty Grable were solid and believable in their roles. The real star of this film was the ill-fated actress Carol Landis, playing the murder victim in flashbacks. Another bonus in this film comes from 2 supporting players. The first was young Elisha Cook Jr. playing switchboard operator Harry Williams. Cook was in The Maltese Falcon 1941 and numerous other film noirs. The other, Laird Cregar, as Ed Cornell, was clearly forecasting Mike Mazurki as Moose Malloy in Murder My Sweet 1944. There's a link for my review of that film in the description. Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors and let you know that there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on I Wake Up Screaming 1941. On IMDb.com, this movie has a fair 7.2 rating. I feel like this is a better film than that rating indicates. RottenTomatoes.com has a more accurate rating of 86% on the tomato meter and 58% audience approval. Cranky New York Times film critic Bosley Crothers said in a January 17, 1942 review, quote, "In spite of the fact that it embodies many perceptible tricks of quality melodrama, flashback, sharp photography, menacing music, and a water torture pace, 20th Century Fox's I Wake Up Screaming, which arrived at the Roxy yesterday, is a pretty obvious whodunit and a strangely unmoving affair. One very good explanation is that it moves with mechanical gravity and pretends to be more serious and portentous than the matter justifies. Another explanation is that the villain is too easy to spot. He practically carries a sign which reads, 'Look at me, I'm it.' And a third and more cogent explanation is that 3 of the principal roles are played with virtually no distinction by Betty Grable, Victor Mature, and Carol Landis. Ouch, that hurt. Actors. Victor Mature played the lead, Frankie Christopher. While known for his biblical sandal adventures, Mature was first covered in a film that could easily be classified as a film noir, The Shanghai Gesture. There's a link for that review below. His acting talents far exceeded his perceived ability. As previously mentioned, noir icon Elisha Cook Jr. played the switchboard operator Harry Williams. Cook was first covered in, if not the first, certainly the best film noir, The Maltese Falcon 1941. William Gargan played a decent cop, Jerry McDonnell. Gargan was first covered in the mediocre film noir Night Editor 1946. Chick Chandler walked through the film a few times playing a reporter. Chandler was first covered in the tremendous pre-code Blood Money 1933. There's a link for the review below. Watch it as soon as you can, but after you finish this video. Morris Ankrum played the Assistant District Attorney, a small part. Ankrum was first covered in Earth vs. the Flying Saucers 1956, where the aliens melted his brain. It really is an excellent sci-fi, and the link to my review is below. The Venus of many GIs serving in World War II, pinup girl Betty Grable played Jill Lynn. Sister to murdered Vicky Lynn, Carol Landis. Grable was born in St. Louis, Missouri in 1916. She had a stockbroker father and a star-making mother. She began taking dancing lessons at the age of 3. At 13, Grable's mother took her to Hollywood and enrolled her in the Hollywood Professional School. The young Grable began getting dancing roles in musicals beginning in 1929. At 15, the future star signed with RKO. She appeared in films such as By Your Leave 1934, College Swing 1938, and Down Argentina Way 1940. By this point, Grable was a pinup model beloved by millions in the military. She was also known as the girl with the $1 million legs, the pinup girl, and America's ideal girl. I first heard of her when Animal, played by Robert Strauss, lamented her 1943 marriage to bandleader Harry James in the World War II POW film Stalag 17, 1953. There's a link to my review in the description. Later films for Grable include A Yank in the RAF 1941, I Wake Up Screaming 1941, Coney Island 1943, Sweet Rosie O'Grady 1943, Call Me Mr. 1951, and How to Marry a Millionaire 1953. Through the late 1940s, Grable was the highest paid female in America. In a masterful PR stunt, her legs were insured by Lloyd's of London for $1 million. Grable made her last film in 1955. Sadly, Grable died at the early age of 55 in 1973. Carol Landis played the murder victim, Vicki Lynn. Landis was born in Wisconsin in 1919. Her father left the family very early in Landis's life, causing hardships for the remaining family members. Landis married after high school at the age of 15. This union was annulled. However, the couple married again and headed for the bright lights of California. The lovely Landis landed a contract with Warner Brothers and began working small parts in 1937. By 1939, she was getting minor speaking roles. Still, she only became famous when she wore a fur suit opposite Victor Mature in 1 Million BC 1940. And I thought Raquel Welch was first to play a cave woman in a film with that same title. Landis's career took off in 1942, however, and she was never given the credit she deserved. Her films include Topper Returns 1941, I Wake Up Screaming 1941, A Gentleman at Heart 1942, Manila Calling 1942, The Power Girls 1943, Four Jills in a Jeep 1944, based on her World War II overseas tour, A Scandal in Paris 1946, Brass Monkey 1948, and The Silk Noose 1948. When a well-known affair with married actor Rex Harrison ended, Landis took her own life using pills. She died on July 5, 1948, having made 49 films and being only 29 years old. Laird Cregar played the role of Detective Ed Cornell. Cregar was born in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, Philadelphia, in 1914. When Cregar was 8, his well-heeled family sent him to Winchester Academy in London. During this time, he served as a page for the Stratford-on-Avon Players, and from then on, Cregar only wanted to be an actor. He returned to the U.S. and finished his education at a couple of elite schools. Cregar studied at the Pasadena Community Playhouse for 2 years. Afterwards, he found some work on stage and only a few walk-on films. Convinced he could do well on stage, Cregar acquired financing for a Los Angeles production of Oscar Wilde. The play was a hit in L.A. and in San Francisco. Shortly after the run, Cregar signed a contract with 20th Century Fox. Cregar made 3 films in 1940. Hudson Bay 1940 brought Cregar the most attention. He played a large, bolsterous fur trapper opposite Paul Muni. The following year brought 3 more interesting movies, Blood and Sand 1941, in which Cregar played a bullfighting critic with Tyrone Power, Charlie's Aunt 1941, which is described as a drag comedy with Jack Benny, and the darkest of the 3 films, I Wake Up Screaming 1941, as a mysterious police detective. Cregar continued with This Gun for Hire 1942, Ring on Her Finger 1942, The Black Swan 1942 as Captain Henry Morgan, and as the Devil in Heaven Can Wait 1943. Cregar was 6 foot 3 inches tall and weighed over 300 pounds. In I Wake Up Screaming 1941, he seemed a cross between Raymond Burr and Sidney Greenstreet, acting in the role of Moose Malloy. In an attempt to obtain leading man roles, Cregar used amphetamines and fasting to lose over 100 pounds for his role in Hangover Square 1945. The rapid weight loss was too much for Cregar's body, and he soon had to undergo surgery for a critical stomach disorder. The shock of it all was too much, and Cregar died of a heart attack in December 1944. Actor Vincent Price delivered his funeral eulogy. Cregar was 30 years old. Alan Mowbray played fading actor Robin Ray. Mowbray was born in London in 1896. He served with distinction in the British Army during World War I. He was awarded the British Military Medal and the French Croix de Guerre for bravery in action. Following the war, Mowbray continued or began acting on stage. It's not clear if he acted before the war. He toured the United States from 1923 to 1929, acting on stage. In 1929, he made his Broadway debut. However, his lack of luck on Broadway was counterbalanced by his luck with Hollywood. Since sound was coming into film, they needed stage actors with solid diction. Mowbray fit the bill. Mowbray began in films in 1931. His role as the father of our country in Alexander Hamilton 1931 was well received. Other films include Sherlock Holmes 1932, A Study in Scarlet 1933, Becky Sharp 1935, the first three-strip Technicolor feature film, My Man Godfrey 1936, I Wake Up Screaming 1941, John Ford's My Darling Clementine 1946, Terror by Night 1946, Captains from Castile 1947 with Tyrone Power, Wagon Master 1950, again Ford directed, Film Noir Lured 1947 with Lucille Ball. There's a link in the description for that review. And The King and I 1956. Mowbray was an original member of the Screen Actors Guild and financed much of the early operation. He continued to act until the year he died in 1969. He had a total of 190 film and television credits. Hey, if you're looking for podcast hosting, you can't do better than Libsyn.com. Rob and Elsie are super helpful over there, and they have a beautiful interface. Use the link below to get up to 2 months free with the code. Story. The movie begins with a newspaper boy shouting extra, extra as he hawks a special edition telling of the murder of Vicki Lynn, Carol Landis. Vicki is a famous fashion model. The scene quickly changes to a room full of detectives grilling Frankie Christopher, Victor Mature, about the murder. The cops have made up their mind that he is guilty and are telling him he will die in the electric chair. A mysterious detective hidden behind bright lights says they can pin it on Frankie.
You're gonna fry for this. It means the hot spot.
It does if you can pin it on me, but I don't think you can.
I think we can.
They tell Frankie to go over it again. He starts telling the tale in flashback, as done in most good film noirs. Following a night at the fights, friends Frankie, aging actor Robin Ray, Alan Mowbray, and newspaper columnist Larry Evans, Alan Jocelyn, stop by a late-night hash house to eat. They consider the waitress Vicki Lynn to be much too beautiful to work at a job like she has.
And hotcakes and coffee.
Is that all?
No, but the rest of it isn't on the menu.
You couldn't afford it if it was.
The guys decide to pull the My Fair Lady 1964 scheme and turn the non-society waitress into a star of the social scene, which is an odd link back to actor Rex Harrison. The next night, Frankie takes Vicki to a fancy club dressed to the nines and wearing a sable wrap. Robin is sitting at a table with Lady Handel, May Beatty, a dame of society. Robin makes a to-do about Vicki when she and Frankie enter the club. Robin and Larry come to the table and pretend to meet Vicki. She is putting on the dog. The men stage a fight over dancing with Vicki. Lady Handel sees the fuss and invites Vicki and Frankie over. Larry has photographers record the meeting. Later, the three men escort Vicki back to her apartment. Switchboard operator and night clerk Harry Williams, Elisha Cook Jr., is rude to Vicki when she asks for her key. The street-tough Frankie slaps his feet off the desk and orders him to get the key. Harry jumps to it.
Good evening, Harry. May I please have my key?
Get that key for Miss Lynn and be quick about it.
Vicki won't let the men come up because she shares an apartment with her sister, Jill Lynn, Betty Grable. On the way out, Harry asks why Frankie got sore. Frankie replies that Vicki is going to be somebody famous. In the current time, the shadowy detective continues to question Frankie, especially about how he knew he could make something of Vicki. Detective Jerry McDonald, William Gargan, is called into another room where Jill Lynn is being interrogated a little more gently. Jill says she works during the day and Vicky worked nights, so they didn't see each other much. Of Frankie, she says he is the one who put foolish ideas in Vicky's head. The scene returns to Jill's story in flashback. Vicky returns from her first visit to the nightclub. She is walking on air and talking about the big hit she is. Vicky is quitting her job to work on making it. Jill tries to calm her sister down, but it's useless. After a quick flashback to the interrogation, Jill continues that she met Frankie the following day. Jill is a little hostile to Frankie. He shows her Vicky's picture in the newspaper. Again, in the interrogation, Jill continues that everything became a whirl as Vicky was giving jobs modeling, advertising shoots, aquacades, ice ballet, and even singing with a band. Jill calls Vicky a chanteuse, and the detectives take note. In flashback, Jill tells of the day when Vicky tells Frankie she is leaving for Hollywood. Frankie takes it well that Vicky has done a screen test and signed a movie contract without him. Vicky is pretty rude. Robin and Larry arrive, and Vicky gives them both the heave-ho. In his interrogation, Frankie says he could have been knocked down with a feather when he got the news Vicky was leaving. The shadow detective says, "So you knocked her down?" Frankie says he did not, but he went and got drunk. Current time shows Frankie, Robin, and Larry in a bar drinking. The three all argue over who did the most for Vicky. Finally, they get down to the individual relationships with Vicky. There were none. Frankie said he got a handshake and mostly waited with Jill until Vicky came home.
We've all gotten it where Nellie wore the beads, and we may as well admit it.
Surely you got some fun out of it.
That's where you're wrong. All I got was a handshake, a smile, and a promise. I had to sit around with that sourpuss sister of hers half the time waiting for Vicky to come home.
Frankie reveals that he has a key to the apartment. The other two show their keys, but that's all they had from the relationship. In Jill's interrogation, they ask her if anything weird happened when she visited Vicky a year earlier. Jill starts telling the story, and it goes into a flashback of Jill sitting in a restaurant waiting for Vicky to get off work. Outside the window, a man watches Vicky. He is some kind of cross between Luca Brasi of The Godfather 1972 and Moose Malloy from Murder My Sweet 1944. Jill sees him watching her sister. The man notices Jill watching him and he leaves.
I'll be with you in a minute, sis. Okay.
Jill tells Vicky about the watcher, but Vicky is not concerned. On the street, Jill spots the man. Vicky looks at the man, but still is unconcerned. In the interrogation, Jill continues to say that she saw the man a few times and that he would turn up in odd places. She then blurts out that the man is probably the murderer. The detectives think Jill is protecting Frankie by accusing someone else. The detectives accuse Jill of being in a relationship with Frankie. She slaps a detective and demands to see someone in authority. Karen.
Was there ever anything between you and this Frankie Christopher?
What are you saying?
You know what I'm saying. You were in love with him, weren't you?
That's a lie.
You were in love with him and he didn't give you a tumble, so you put your sister out of the way.
The head detective sends for Detective Ed Cornell, Laird Cregar. It turns out that Cornell is the shadow detective from Frankie's interrogation. When Cornell comes into the room, Jill sees that he is the man who was following Vicky. She yells to the detective that Cornell is the stalker. Cornell says it is his district and he has to look around. Detective McDonald confirms that Cornell was on a trip when the murder occurred. Cornell asks about the ride Frankie and Jill and Vicky took on the day before the murder. Imagine telling a date that you're going to go for a ride. It was a simpler time. Cornell says he already got the truth out of Frankie and she better tell the truth. Jill continues the story in flashback. Vicky notices that Jill is in an excellent mood. She tells Frankie that Jill is in love with him. Vicky says Frankie will be glad to be rid of her so he can be with Jill.
We'll be sorry to see you go, Vicky.
No, you won't. You'll be glad.
What?
You'll be glad to get rid of me. Jill's in love with you, haven't you noticed?
In the interrogation, Cornell turns get rid of into murder. Jill flashes back to finding Vicky's body. Jill says music was playing and the door was open. She ran inside and found Frankie standing over her sister's dead body. Suddenly, Jill thinks Frankie may have been the killer. Cornell returns to Frankie's interrogation and starts drilling him about the phrase, get rid of. Cornell says Frankie killed Vicky in a drunken fever. Cornell attacks Frankie and has to be pulled back. Frankie is called in to see the assistant district attorney, Morris Ankrum. Cornell tells McDonald that Frankie is definitely guilty. A reporter tells Frankie that Cornell suspects him and the detective is always right. Jill is already in the DA's office when Frankie arrives. The DA tells Frankie he is sorry for wasting his time and they have found the killer. The killer is Harry, the switchboard operator. Jill is shocked and leaves. The DA says Harry has been missing since 5:30 on the day of the murder, so naturally he's guilty. Frankie vows to murder Harry if he finds him first. Frankie catches up with Jill outside of the building. He asks to be friends. Jill denies that she loves Frankie. She gives him a rude heave-ho. The newspapers now say that Harry is wanted for murder. Later that night, Frankie wakes from a fitful sleep and finds Cornell sitting in his dark bedroom. Frankie tells the detective to get out, but Cornell says he is keeping him informed about the case. Cornell tells that he found a cigarette butt of Frankie's brand in the closet. He also says he doesn't believe Harry killed Vicky. When Cornell says Frankie had his way with Vicky and now with Jill, Frankie gets mad and throws Cornell out. Jill is shocked to see Harry back at the switchboard the next day. He says he explained to the cops that he was visiting his parents in Brooklyn. When Jill recoils, Harry says he would never hurt Vicky and Jill shouldn't think that he could.
I thought you'd gone away.
I just went over to Brooklyn to see my parents. I didn't realize it would cause such a fuss. I explained everything to the cops.
Oh, I thought...
Well, you shouldn't have thought that, Miss Lynn. You know I wouldn't do a thing like that, don't you?
Harry then reveals that he has packed all of Vicky's clothes. Creepy. Frankie calls for Jill, but she has Harry tell him she has moved and left no forwarding address. Harry helps Jill with the bags and says he felt that it was not his place to attend Vicky's funeral. He refuses a tip from Jill as she leaves. Cornell comes to the DA's office and tells him he still thinks Frankie is the killer. The DA is pretty hostile and demands that he look at other suspects such as Robin, but they decide to leave the newspaper reporter alone. Cornell says he will bring in Frankie as well.
Good morning, Chief.
What do you want?
Nothing much.
Well, then get out of here and get to work.
I'm not talking about Williams. I'm talking about Frankie Christopher.
Christopher. All you talk about is Christopher. What about some of the others? That ham actor Robin Ray or Larry Evans, the newspaper columnist. Let's sweat him a little.
Better leave the newspaper man alone till you get something solid. He might give you bad notice.
Robin is a nervous wreck as he waits in the police station. Frankie comes in and goads the aging actor. The two men are ushered into the dark room where Cornell, the DA, and other detectives await. They show a film of Vicky singing. All of the cops stare at the suspects for a reaction. Suddenly, Robin freaks out and tries to get out of the room. The DA has the suspects taken to his office. Robin tells that Vicky made him feel young and able to act again. He was the one that arranged her screen test. She laughed when Robin told her his feelings and says she was not hooking up with an old has-been. They asked Robin where he was on the day of the murder. Robin says he was in a local sanatorium where he goes when he's overstressed. The DA asks Cornell to check the alibi and is told that it has already been verified as accurate. Frankie asks to leave. Outside of the building, Frankie stops to talk with a reporter. Cornell comes outside and asks Frankie for a ride uptown. Cornell gloats that he is low on cash, having spent so much time and money trying to pin the crime on Frankie. Cornell continues that he is going to get Frankie executed. Later, Cornell tracks down Jill at her new apartment and breaks in. He sees Jill inside doing dishes, but she doesn't hear him. Cornell goes outside and rings the bell. Cornell pushes his way in over Jill's objections. He mentions a picture Jill has titled Garden of Hope. Cornell says Jill is in love with Frankie and holding back information. As soon as Cornell leaves, Jill removes a note that Frankie had written to Vicky saying, "After what you did last night, the sooner you are out of the way, the better it will be." Jill calls Frankie. He misses the call, but later sends flowers. He comes by her house later and picks her up and takes her to the fights. Jill is a little put off by Frankie's bloodlust at the fights. She asks if he brought Vicky to the fights. They go for a walk in Frankie's old neighborhood, and he is well known. Again, Jill asks if he brought Vicky here, and he says no. Frankie says Vicky only wanted to go to nightclubs. Jill says she has never been to a nightclub, and they head to the Pegasus Club. Outside the club, Frankie gives money to a washed-up fighter named Ozinski, Pat McKee. Cornell watches them go into the club from across the street. Larry sees the pair together and runs to put it in his column. Under questioning, Frankie says he did not love Vicky, he only wanted to promote her. This makes Jill happy. Jill and Frankie leave the club, and Frankie takes her to a late-night natatorium called the Lido Plunge. I think this bit was only added to show the two leads in swimming suits.
Oh.
Ouch.
They return to Jill's apartment, and she invites Frankie up so she can return the note she had hidden in the picture. When they kiss, Cornell appears at the door and seizes the letter. Cornell is excited to arrest Frankie. He continues that he found brass knuckles, presumably what Vicky was murdered with, in Frankie's room. As Cornell gives the business to Frankie, Jill cracks Cornell on the head. Frankie escapes through the kitchen, and Jill sends the other cop to a Murphy bed door. Jill runs out and catches up with Frankie. Later, inside a bicycle shop, Jill works to hacksaw the handcuffs off Frankie. They decide they are in love and plan on being married. They go to an all-night, adult-only theater. Not porno. Vagrants and people with no place to sleep watch the movie over and over. Frankie goes to get money in the morning, and he sends Jill to wait in the New York Public Library. She is picked up by McDonald and another cop. Frankie arrives in time to see Jill being arrested. Over the next few days, Cornell hunts the street for Frankie as Frankie hides on the street. Frankie catches Cornell on the street and says he will surrender if they release Jill. Cornell says he will never give up on hunting for Frankie. When Frankie escapes, he shows he was using a Tootsie Roll as a fake gun. Cornell goes to see the DA and asks if he has read The Sex Lives of Butterflies. The DA is mad, but the jest is that by releasing Jill, they will get Frankie quickly. The DA says that Cornell's career rides on the move. Jill goes home that night, but is closely watched by the police. She notices some cards on flowers that have been coming in after Vicky's death, and most of them say, "Because I promised." Jill climbs to the rooftop and crosses over to the next building on a small board. Of course she's wearing high heels. Jill finds Frankie in the all-night theater. She shows Frankie the flower cards, and they go to Rosedale Cemetery. Frankie tells Jill to wait by herself. Nope, not gonna happen.
You wait here.
Frankie meets with the cemetery caretaker, Frank Orth. First, the caretaker opens the door at night. Nope, Frankie pretends to be a reporter. When he asks about flowers, the caretaker says the flowers come to the grave daily from Keating Florist. They go to Keating's, and Jill talks to Keating, Charles Lane, and she is led to believe that the flowers are coming from Larry. Frankie breaks into Larry's apartment and wakes the sleeping man. Larry tries to pull a gun on Frankie and believes Frankie is the killer.
You won't need that.
I just thought I'd try it.
So you think I'm guilty too?
Yes, and so does everybody else.
Larry explains that he was with Vicky on the day she was murdered. When they went to the apartment, Jill didn't have a key, neither did Larry, and the pass key was missing, as was Harry the switchboard operator. Larry decided to climb the fire escape, then through a window and open the apartment from the inside. He says he won't forget her for 2 weeks, so he promised to send her flowers daily for 2 weeks. Larry also says that the apartment smelled of cigarette smoke and that Harry was not at the switchboard when he left. Frankie pulls Larry's gun on McDonald, who is waiting outside. He surrenders the gun to the cop, and they wait in the stairwell. As planned by Jill and Frankie, Jill calls Harry from the old apartment. Harry is sleeping at the desk. Jill pretends to be Vicky and asks why he did it if he loved her.
Hello, Harry. This is Vicky. Harry, this is Vicky. Why did you do it, Harry? Didn't you love me?
Harry breaks down, and Frankie comes down and starts asking why he killed Vicky. Harry was hiding in the closet, smoking when Vicky was alone. When he came out, she screamed, and he murdered her in a panic. Harry also says he explained everything to Cornell when the cop found him in Brooklyn.
I told the cop how it was when he traced me to Brooklyn. He said he understood too. So he told me just to come back here and keep quiet. He'd forget all about it.
What cop?
The big one.
Ed Cornell?
That's the one.
McDonald heard everything and they arrest Harry. McDonald allows Frankie to go into Cornell's apartment uptown. It's a shrine to Vicky with pictures, posters, souvenirs, and flowers. Cornell is shocked when Frankie tells about the talk with Harry. Cornell pours himself a drink. He says Frankie took her away from him long before Harry murdered her. Cornell had watched her and helped her out of a jam one night. They met a few times for coffee, and Cornell fell in love and wanted to marry Vicky.
Started to hope that we might get to know each other better. That I might even get up enough courage to ask her to marry me someday. Then you came along with your grand plans of making something of her. Putting ideas into her head that she was a glamour girl and all that kind of stuff. Why didn't you leave her alone?
He rented an apartment he couldn't afford to impress her. Jill, McDonald, and another cop come in as Cornell drops dead from the poison he took in his drink. Later, Robin and Harry are sitting with Lady Handel in a nightclub. The dame asks about Jill, the beautiful girl dancing with Frankie. They both say they don't know either of them. All right, I want to thank everybody that supports me. I appreciate the emails and the comments. Go ahead and subscribe and send me comments. I really appreciate them. You can support the channel by buying a t-shirt or a coffee cup or a sticker. Follow the link below to the merchant store. It really helps us put out content. Conclusion. This movie was remade as Vicky 1953. Jean Crane played the role of Jill Lynn, and the lovely Jean Peters played her sister Vicky. Elliot Reed, who comes off as a lot softer than Frankie, played Stephen Christopher. Finally, Richard Boone, a great tough guy, played Lieutenant Cornell. It is definitely worth a watch. For some reason, the tune Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz 1939 is played throughout this film. Eddie Muller of TCM's Nor Alley says he doesn't know why or how it was used so often in this movie. Setting this film in New York instead of Los Angeles prevented problems with the Hays Code, as they were not as sensitive about how the Big Apple was portrayed. Was this movie a film noir by its look? Yes. Was it a film noir by story? Yes. Was it the first film noir? Not by a long shot. More will come on this in the future. World famous short summary. The roommate swap? Is it possible? Beware the Moors. Some boxes will pop up here. One will be a review I recommend you watch. Another will be a playlist of great noir movies.